So today I wanted to talk about what I have coined the game theory of pretty privilege. Or I don't know if pretty privilege is the exact term, but basically the respectability politics of being a woman, first and foremost, in today's patriarchal society. And then on top of that, the dynamics that you have to deal with, the forces of patriarchy that keep us basically confined within this closed matrix. Okay, no matter which quadrant or where along the spectrum you fall. So I'm going to get into the details in a moment, but like no matter where along the spectrum you fall in your existence as a woman in this current reality, you cannot escape the box. I saw this brilliant TikTok creator once. She had a video. I really wish that I had it saved. She said something to the effect of women are basically expected to sacrifice at the altar of like motherhood, piety. They're expected to suffer in order to gain respect and adoration and love. All of those things in this society. As a woman, you're expected to suffer, essentially. And that's when people will reward you. That's when people will see you as someone who is deserving of their respect and their support and all of that, right? And this is directly tied to your beauty or your perceived beauty in society. So actually everything that I'm going to talk about today, all of these different components of the matrix that I'm going to talk about, it pertains to what society perceives you as. So it doesn't really matter how you think of yourself, or maybe those who are closest to you who know your true personality or your true story. Perception is reality, right? When you're talking about the way that you're taken by the public on the world stage, all the world's a stage, as Shakespeare or whoever said. I'm using this as a framework to help me like explain in an easier and more digestible way to you guys. And I'm going to use celebrity women or high profile women as examples of certain archetypes. Okay. So I'm not saying this is obviously not an absolute model, and there's obviously exceptions and there's nuances and things that need to be taken into account. There's outliers, right, in the real world. But for the most part, what I have discovered, because I've been thinking over this theory for the past couple of weeks, and I have discovered that, yeah, like pretty much any woman that I can think of in the public eye these days, any feminine archetype in the modern day, even after the Me Too movement, even in this era of, girl boss feminism, even with all of that, at the end of the day, we still live under patriarchy, right? Which means that we live in a deeply, not only misogynistic society as it pertains to the men, but also there's a lot of women walking around here with internalized misogyny. And actually, as sad as it is, we need to walk in the light of the truth and recognize and admit that a lot of the continuation and the upholding of the power of the patriarchy is actually disproportionately largely dependent on complicitness of women that have internalized misogyny. There's many ways that society programs that into us as young children, right? So it really doesn't matter. Like you look at across the globe, there's so many different countries and cultures and religions, and all of them in some way or another to varying degrees hammer it into us when we're very young, this idea of internalized misogyny, essentially. We all have memories of triangulation, people triangulating us, adults in our lives, triangulating us against other girls, the media pitting women, celebrities against each other.
I would read the press and be like, but this didn't happen. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a fight on the runway. It really was blown up out of proportion.
No, most definitely.
Constantly comparing the perceived, again, beauty and desirability of certain female stars against each other, even though, it could have been that those two individuals themselves may have not wanted anything to do with being in competition with each other, but it doesn't matter because like society, whatever industry that they're in, forces upon them this perceived competition, right? I have come up with this framework that I'm going to call loosely, kind of in a tongue-in-cheek way, I call this the game theory of pretty privilege, or let's say beauty economics. I feel like that makes more sense. And so basically, again, the whole thing is a spectrum, but for the purposes of today's class, today's lecture, we're going to focus on these 4 traits or characteristics. Most women would fall into one of these 4 quadrants. So you have beautiful women. Remember, this is all what they are perceived as by society, right? Not necessarily what your individual opinion is, but what the society as a whole or the male gaze collective perceives these women to be. So you're either beautiful or we'll just say you're plain, like a plain Jane type. And any plain Jane type can turn into a beautiful woman, of course. But we're talking about women that, pretty much solidly occupy this mischaracterization of being plain as far as their looks go, right? Or maybe it's just that they don't feel any need or any desire to appeal to the male gaze. There's a lot of women like that, of course, that don't care about performing femininity or performing beauty. You know, I happen to be a woman that does like to dress up and do all of the stereotypically girly things. Like, obviously, I have a lot of makeup on now. I review makeup on my channel. I dress for myself, but like I dress in a sexy way to show off my body. So if you want to say that that's because I was raised with, you know, the expectation to pander to the male gaze and that I internalize that, I accept that criticism. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is who I am. And I'm a Leo too, right? So I like to be flashy. I like to show off my assets. I feel like that's the right of every woman. But anyway, I'm getting off track again. So you fall under either of these categories aesthetics wise, right? And then also you are either perceived as, you could say it in many different ways, but basically what I landed on is that you're either perceived as having the soft life or being unapologetic about your beauty, your power, your own self-worth. So that is received extremely differently depending on whether you're perceived as beautiful or whether you're perceived as plain. And also under this beautiful label, keep in mind too that there's also a different way that you're going to be received depending on whether you are beautiful in a way that is threatening to or not threatening to other women. Because there's a difference, right? Like, so for example, someone like Taylor Swift, and like, don't try to come for me if I mention your faves. This is not, please. Okay, we're trying to have an academic discussion here. So like, for example, someone like Taylor Swift, I think everyone can agree that she fits kind of like the Anglo ideal of a tall, blonde, thin pop singer. I don't know if she has blue eyes, but she fits that all-American, like blonde girl next door look. But I wouldn't say that people see her as beautiful in a way that feels threatening to them. You know, women who have internalized misogyny and they measure themselves up to other women, I wouldn't say that they necessarily would think of someone like Taylor Swift when it comes to someone that kicks up their insecurities, as opposed to Ariana Grande, for example, who kind of has an image and a reputation for being a homewrecker. And she also has that quality. She has kind of like that sex kitten seductress quality. Again, whether this is justified or not, whether this is fairly or unfairly attributed to her, that's the way that she is perceived in the pop cultural zeitgeist, right? So that's how she's viewed. She's more of like, you know, the homewrecker, Jezebel type of person. And to be fair, she doesn't really help her own case either, because she has songs that are literally named "Break Up With Your Girlfriend," "I'm Bored," stuff like that. And she also put out a song. This is what I thought was really wild too. She put out one of her recent songs. Maybe it's not so recent anymore, but "The Boy Is Mine," which is also a popular 90s song by Brandy and Monica. This new song by Ariana has nothing to do with that OG song, but maybe it's a nod to it in terms of just the title alone. But yeah, it was like really weird to me that she put out that single right around the time that the rumors came out, or it was confirmed that her and Ethan Slater were having an affair with each other on both of their spouses, because they were both married to other people at the time. So yeah, just a whole mess. But anyway, we'll get into the celebrity soon. So I put like soft life, unapologetic. And so the flip side to that, or the opposite of that, would be someone who's perceived as a woman who is perceived as hardworking, or more specifically and more insidiously, someone who suffers, right? So this is where, you know, you hear the phrase like long-suffering wife or long-suffering girlfriend. But something about that, once you start to deprogram yourself from all these misogynistic tropes and ideals, it's really hard because, you know, depending on the level to which you were indoctrinated as a young girl, like depending on how misogynistic of an example other people in your life, particularly other women in your life, set for you, that's also going to determine like how long of a process or a journey it's going to take for you to get out of this mindset. And again, the uncomfortable reality, the sad reality, is that a lot of women actually don't want to free themselves from the shackles of internalized misogyny, you know? So you also have to be careful, like don't save people that don't want to be saved. That's my whole thing too. That's why I make these videos on my channel. I don't see my job as running after or trying to convince people that don't want to be convinced of something. I put out the content here and I just trust the universe that my message will resonate with whoever is looking for it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is like, don't waste your energy or your life force trying to convince women that don't actually want to be cured of their internalized misogyny, or that they don't actually want to be deprogrammed, you know? And they'll never say this explicitly because that in itself is kind of taboo to say, right? That's kind of one of the many paradoxical things about living under this patriarchal system. So like they won't ever say that, but you'll be able to tell in their actions. You know, they might pay lip service to these empty platitudes. Like they might say all the Instagram quotes about girl boss and being a girl's girl and whatever. But when you look at their actions though, they're gossiping about other girls behind their back. And, one example that stands out in my mind, which I don't really want to talk about her anymore. I broke her psychology down extensively, actually, in several of my other videos. But, this one girl that I participated in the beauty pageant back in January with, she was very much, I realized, probably a little too late, but yeah, it was very clear to me by the end of the whole pageant that she wasn't actually invested in the message of empowering women. She was just using that because she thought that that's what would give her the best image publicly, right? But behind closed doors, it was clear from her actions, the way that she was so quick to trash other contestants and put down their looks and everything. These are other girls that have never done anything to her. They don't really know each other on an intimate basis. It's just the fact that she felt threatened. Someone else was gonna take her crown. And so the moment that she felt threatened, that's when she felt comfortable to just bash and insult any other women that were rising up in the ranking ahead of her. But anyway, be careful of those types. Don't waste your breath on them is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's just focus quadrant by quadrant. You guys, I feel like a mad scientist. Look at the notes that I took. I don't even know what I wrote. And yes, this is a Zootopia notebook. But whatever, I'm just gonna go off the top of my head as usual, and I'll just reference my notes. Don't mind me if I look down sometimes. Okay, so basically, again, this is not, please don't come up in here and be a Poindexter and be like, well, actually, I know someone who, no, I know that there's exceptions and this is not a perfect model, okay? But I'm just speaking in generalities, and I'm trying to provide us all with a concrete framework to where it's easy to understand what I'm talking about. My point in this video is that society makes it impossible for women to exist outside of these four corners of this matrix right here. However, there is one way. It's not a perfect solution, but there is one solution that some women have caught on to, in which they have found a way to exist in this system while not acquiescing to or not having to undergo necessarily all the humiliation rituals and things that society typically likes to foist upon women, especially those perceived as very attractive and very privileged, in order to humble them in the public eye. So I'm trying to say that there is somewhat of a light at the end of the tunnel. At the end of the day, we still live under patriarchy, which is not ideal, but we can still find a way to optimize our circumstance and our experience. And so I'm going to go step by step and lay out how you could possibly go about doing that, okay, in this video. Hint, hint, moving in silence has a lot to do with it, okay? So that's why it's so important. It's important to learn how to regulate your emotions. It's important to do your inner work so that you don't feel wounded anymore. I mean, every woman or every person deals with their inner wounds and their childhood wounds differently, but in a lot of cases for women, what happens is that they will trauma dump, right? Or they'll overshare on the internet, especially this day and age. So if you can self-master enough to the point where you can move in silence without feeling the need to seek for validation outside of you, or, stunt on Instagram for likes, which I'm not saying it's bad to post a thirst trap here and there or whatever, but I'm saying if you can learn to move in a certain way that certain women in this world that I have observed and realized that they were able to kind of cheat this system. If you can learn how to do that, and trust me, I'm on this journey as well with all of you, then I think we're going in a good direction is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we're gonna go quadrant by quadrant. So basically I kind of labeled it in order of what most women would prefer to be. If you had a choice, I ranked each quadrant from 1 to 4 based on, for simplified terms, we're gonna say it's in order of how loved each woman that inhabits each of these quadrants are, not just how loved they are, but how much society approves of them, okay? So they get the stamp of approval from society, and they get the most adoration, and they're seen as the most angelic. So the first quadrant would obviously be women who are perceived as beautiful, yet also hardworking or long-suffering or very pure, right? They're drop dead beautiful and gorgeous, but yet they stayed a virgin until they were married, and they only, had sexual relations with their husband their entire life. Even though their husband might have been a cheating dog that was committing infidelity on his wife left and right, as long as she is, again, the long-suffering wife, society will just continue to elevate her to saint status. Then I think you move to women who are perceived as more plain, right? Or more average in the looks department and hardworking. So these women, they also experience quite a high level of respect in society. Respect, that's the word I was looking for. So if you're like on the plainer side, but then you're very hardworking, you had a history of studying very hard and you went to a good university, you put in the hours, etc., at your job, and usually it's a very respectful profession, like being a lawyer or a doctor or something. It's kind of like you're proving yourself in the traditional way that men have historically always been expected to prove themselves in society. You didn't have to get anything off of your looks or your sexual desirability. You earned, like, this is again society's perception, public perception. People perceive you as someone who earned your way to your spot in an honest way, right? You didn't use your feminine wiles to manipulate men. You didn't sleep your way to the top. You got there through hard work and studying, etc. These women, I would say, enjoy like the second most amount of respect and adoration in society behind the beautiful and hardworking women. Then we move to the plain and unapologetic women, right? So whether they're unapologetic about living the soft life, or, by the way, I would characterize myself as someone who is unapologetic. Like, I'm not interested in performing suffering for the world just so that people that I don't care about, people whose opinions that I don't care about, can approve of me. I clocked that tea a long time ago, let's just say. And so I don't fall for that. But the thing is, like, if you find yourself in this quadrant, sorry, I feel like I'm not in frame. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm like so thrown off because my monitor literally died in the beginning of the stream. So if you find yourself in this corner of the beauty economics game theory matrix, then you're kind of like behind the beautiful hard workers and the plain hard workers, but you're protected by the fact that you're plain in terms of your appearance, right? Which means that other women don't find you threatening. And honestly, if we're being real, men as well don't find you that intimidating or threatening. And also they're, the men that are insecure or who have a chip on their shoulder about pretty girls rejecting them and whatnot, they're not going to be triggered by you either when they interact with you. So the worst that you really have to deal with when you find yourself in this corner is that basically you're invisible, right? And we hear a lot of think pieces on women who inhabit this area as well. You hear a lot of grievances about them feeling like they're invisible, that they don't matter in society. So like, we're not saying that it's peaches and creams over here or that this is an ideal place to be. But what I'm saying is that I ranked it as 3, right? Because the reason that I ranked it 3 is that I feel like at least it is slightly easier to exist in society, right? Because sometimes being invisible, after all, is protection.
So actually, a lot of men tend to choose wives from the third quadrant of the so-called plain and unapologetic, or maybe just like not overly ambitious women who are more plain in the looks department. So yeah, unambitious women. That could have been another good term to add in there to sort of characterize what I'm talking about here. But yeah, men do tend to pick women from either quadrants 2 or 3. It depends on the man and his own security level, of course. But honestly, I would say that quadrant 3 is probably the most quote-unquote popular in terms of getting wifed up because they pose the least threat to the male partner, right? They're not going to be creating more competition for the guy because other men are not necessarily looking at his wife, looking to steal her away from him because she's just so gorgeous or seductive. And then also at the same time, women in group number 3 pose less of a threat professionally than those in group number 2 to men, or insecure men at least, because that way the man can always feel like he is smarter and more successful than his wife. Of course, women in quadrants 1 and 2 also get married a lot, but usually in those cases, as long as the man's level of ambition or success is greater than that of his wife's, then in that case it could go smoothly. So for example, you could have a quadrant 2 woman who is like super hardworking and super successful in his career, but as long as the man makes more or is more successful, that dynamic could work. Which of course leaves the women in quadrant 4, who are typically seen as the Jezebels of society. And even if they do get married, typically these marriages are rife with a lot of instability, cheating, accusations of cheating, whatever. That's why you typically see the marriages of the women in quadrant 4. They usually don't end well. They usually end in divorce, or the dynamic is very strained. There's a lot of friction there. They just don't go well. My hypothesis, my theory is that quadrant 3 women get wifed up the most, even more so than 1 or 4.
As women, especially if you're like a feminine woman who identifies as heterosexual and you want to be perceived as attractive to men, which there's nothing wrong with. If you're like a feminine woman, then it's natural that you would want members of the other gender to find you attractive, or even members of your own gender, right? Like other women in your peer group, you want to be seen as one of the group. If you run in circles of, career women who seem to have not only their careers together, but they also are very put together physically speaking, like their fashion sense is good, they have great haircuts and makeup and whatnot that flatters their features. If you're like working in that same environment, it's only natural for you to want to fit in, right? And so I'm not downplaying the grievances of the women that are in this box. I fully acknowledge, I'm aware of, the unique pain that you might feel when you're here, but I would argue that it's still it's safer than number 4, which is the beautiful and unapologetic quadrant. And I would argue that this is the most dangerous place to be as a woman. So in a way, yes, you might have people that still love you and they become your fans solely based on your looks. If you're beautiful, but you are perceived as somebody who very, very consciously rejects suffering, rejects the idea that you have to be humble or go through humiliation rituals to please the public, then inevitably you're going to have a huge faction of people villainizing you. And it's going to be very extreme emotions that you kick up in people, whether it's extreme love and admiration, which usually borders on obsessive, or people, because you're beautiful and because you dare to not apologize for it or make up for it in some way, work yourself to the bone to prove that you're more than just a pretty face, then people are, again, they're going to get triggered by you and feel that, depending on how crazy the person is, some of them might actually take it upon themselves to personally humble you, right? And this is why we see the phenomenon of a lot of beautiful women getting harassed at work, or they get ostracized at schools, at jobs and whatnot. I'm sure you guys know the classic movie Milena, starring Monica Bellucci. Yeah, it's about a beautiful woman. I don't remember where it was set, probably Italy, somewhere in Europe, right? And then her husband was away for war or for the draft. So during that period when her husband was away, and this movie was set back in the day, so she had no way of really connecting or communicating with her husband to even get updates from him. So she didn't know even when or if he would ever return to her in one piece, right? So during that period when she was living alone, essentially, even though she was technically married on paper and she was devoted to, her husband, she was seen as a threat by all the other women of that town because of how beautiful she was and because of the fact that there was no man attached to her or taking care of her. So although other women saw her as a threat immediately, they were afraid that their husbands would lust after her. And there's this famous scene where they basically pull her into, a shop or something and brutalize her. And it's very hard to watch. But yeah, they basically pull her hair, cut her with scissors or whatever. They just throw her out on the street and she looks like a mangled mess and her clothes are all ripped and stuff. There's a similar scene in Cinderella too. Actually, we're talking about Milena, which is an R-rated movie, but there's also PG-rated examples of this everywhere in media. So that scene in Cinderella, when her stepsisters and stepmother are about to leave for the ball, they just assumed that, okay, we distracted her with enough chores so that she wouldn't be able to go to the ball. And yet, of course, she's able to step out in this beautiful dress that all the birds and the mice made for her. And the moment that the stepsisters see her and see how beautiful she is, they rip apart her dress. This is not a spoiler for anyone, right? We've all seen Disney's Cinderella before. Okay, so that scene where they rip apart her dress and berate her, that was basically, now that I think about it, I feel like that was almost frame by frame a copy of the scene that I was just talking about in Milena, where the townswomen brutalize her. It's just a PG version, essentially, of the exact same scene. So wow, that's kind of spooky. But anyway, all right, so now we're going to go through each quadrant one by one. Quadrant 1, the top tier, beautiful, conventionally attractive women. However, they are perceived as hardworking or long-suffering or decent, right? A very pure, decent type. They don't show too much skin. They're very modest, that kind of woman. And even if it's let's say, okay, so I have examples here. Marilyn Monroe. Again, this is not, I don't think that these are, perfect divisions, but I put Marilyn Monroe in this quadrant because ultimately she did suffer a lot in her life. And, you know, it's a known fact. She had a very tumultuous love life and tumultuous upbringing overall, right? And it's well known that she was always kind of like looking for love that she never received in her childhood. So although I'm not sure how much that may have impacted people's view on her while she was still alive, I think maybe she might have been perceived more as like the beautiful, unapologetic type of woman while she was living. But undoubtedly, after she passed, though, I feel like she's seen as more of a tragic beauty, right? Like, she was beautiful and captivating, but then at the end of the day, she suffered a lot to the point where she lost her own life because she wasn't able to, you know, overcome her childhood wounds or her demons or whatever. So because of that, see, this is how deep this goes. And that's why I think this topic is super important, because it's like, you're going to notice, I think the most disturbing realization that I came to out of this whole brainstorming on this topic is that the women who occupied this quadrant, you're going to notice that a lot of them ended up dead or prematurely unalived. Okay. The fact that they died young or died unjustly, that alone is a huge factor as to why they are so deified and beloved in the cultural zeitgeist or in our society. So take a minute and realize or think about how dark that actually is. That if you're a beautiful, vibrant woman, you are inevitably going to attract jealousy and envy from other women who may perceive themselves to be not as beautiful as you, or they feel threatened by your presence because they feel like, you know, you're taking away attention from their husbands or whatnot. Think about how just dark and depressing that is. Think of how messed up it is that as long as you die young or you're perceived as going through the right amount of suffering in your lifetime, as long as the threat is no longer there, that's when people, and especially other women, feel comfortable to celebrate you, right? That's why you have all these women today that, oh my God, like my idol is Marilyn Monroe, or oh my God, our people's princess is Princess Diana, right? Princess Diana also got unalived in a car crash, very tragically. Allegedly, it was on purpose by the queen. You're not gonna convince me otherwise, but yeah, this isn't a layer that I didn't even realize, or I didn't even come upon prior to this video. But a lot of these women, you'll see that they move between quadrants, depending on whether we're talking about when they were still living versus after they're dead, the perception or the memory of them after they're dead. So like, for example, Princess Diana, Marilyn Monroe, they might have been perceived more as being in this quadrant up here, like beautiful, but, you know, soft life, untouchable, just insane amounts of privilege, right? Therefore, not deserving of sympathy or empathy from the public and from other women who perceive themselves to be lower than them. But then the moment that they die a young, tragic death, or the moment that it comes out how much they suffered at the hands of, you know, men in the industry back then when Marilyn Monroe was working in old Hollywood, or Princess Diana, how she suffered at the hands of the firm, I believe is what they call themselves, the British royal family, how much Charles put her through with his affair with Camilla, the way that he just humiliated her all the time. I think there was like the infamous interview where they asked him if he was in love, and then he said something like, yeah, I guess, whatever that means.
And I suppose in love. Of course. Whatever in love means.
Diana, remember, was like all of about 20 years old at the time, which is like a child to me. So as long as they suffer, as long as we know that they were smiling through their pain, or they were smiling through their tears, oh, okay, now she's an angel, you know, now she's our princess. Now we must protect her at all costs, because something about that is like, yeah, it's because like, if you know that a beautiful woman has suffered or is going through a lot, or like whatever, she was mistreated by people in her life, it takes away some of the threat of what she poses to a less attractive woman or a less self-assured woman. Who else did I put here? Megan Fox, I feel like, is also kind of, I mean, like Megan Fox, okay, I have my separate issues with her. It has nothing to do with her beauty or whatever. She's undeniably beautiful. But Megan Fox, I feel like the reason that she's so beloved now, and the reason that she was able to come back kind of to the Hollywood scene and get welcomed with open arms, although she kind of disappeared again, I feel like, because she had that brief resurgence when she got with Machine Gun Kelly, who I think is like the worst kind of partner that any woman could ever choose. So that alone tells me a lot about her. But anyway, regardless though, the reason I put Megan Fox in this group is because she disappeared for a long time. Because remember, she got married very young to, what's that guy's name? Brian Austin Green. And like basically kind of just became a wife and had 3 kids with him. And she put her career on hold for a long time. As much as a lot of women might not want to admit it, but I think that that's a huge factor as to why she's not seen as much of a threat. That's one of the reasons why I think women love her so much, even the ones that have the ones that are still steeped into internalized misogyny in terms of their mindset, because she was kind of taken out of the industry, right? Like her earning power, her star power was severely dampened after she got married to Brian Austin Green and essentially went away for like over a decade to focus on being a mom to their 3 children. And that was in the prime of her life as well. I don't know the exact ages, but basically her early 20s until like 35, mid 30s, she was taken out of the game, so to speak. Like she was out of the Hollywood game, the visibility game. And so that makes insecure women who would otherwise have felt threatened by her, that made them more secure and thus more open to supporting her. And like she also benefits from the nostalgia factor, of course. But yeah. That's my take on someone like Megan Fox. I'm sure there's other examples as well. Feel free to list other people if they come to your mind. I put Amal Clooney as well, right? And she's kind of a remarkable case because she married one of the most kind of elusive and sought after bachelors in Hollywood. I think George Clooney even famously said once that he was never going to get married, or he definitely expressed publicly in some capacity that he was just not interested in getting married. I don't know if he was married before Amal, but yeah, I know that for a certain generation, a little earlier than me, I never really grew up with the image of George Clooney as this amazing bachelor, but I feel like for maybe Gen X and earlier, he was really seen as like one of the it guys, one of the leading Hollywood men. Again, I don't see what the big deal is, but that's what his perception was, right? He was up there with Brad Pitt and the likes. And so the fact that Amal Clooney was able to come along and marry him and not be villainized, although, I'm sure she probably does have to deal with like groupies, but for the most part, I would say people respect Amal Clooney, right? And that's because, again, she is beautiful, top tier, like 10 out of 10. Even though she's not in entertainment, she actually fits that kind of like Hollywood A-list actress type of partner to a T. Like nobody had anything nasty. Nobody could say anything about Amal's beauty when she got with George Clooney, regardless of the fact that she didn't originally run in those Hollywood circles, because she undeniably does fit that beauty standard, is what I'm trying to say. But the reason that she's not crucified as much, and the reason that she was so praised, the media immediately loved her and took her side, is because, again, I think she's perceived as like that really hardworking, suffering type, the type that got to her success by decent means, right? Like in a dignified way, whatever that means, that she didn't have to sell her body or her looks or whatever. See, patriarchal society loves a woman that just happens to be beautiful, but is like not even aware of it, or just they're not even interested in capitalizing off of their own beauty, because they are not like those other witches and Jezebels who unapologetically make money off of their beauty and their desirability. Okay, no, they are dignified and decent women who go the correct route. Okay, they apply themselves in their studies and their education. And so therefore, people love them. And they're not as harshly targeted for criticism. And so, yeah, Amal Clooney is a lawyer, and she's had a very decorated career for a long time. She definitely, she made a name for herself before she even met George Clooney, and she was never in the entertainment industry. So that, again, that's also another layer of protection that she gets from the jealous, internalized misogyny mob out there. In contrast, though, so I'm going to go through each quadrant separately, but just in contrast with Amal Clooney, I want to point out the fact that Lauren Sanchez, okay, so what's the difference between Lauren Sanchez and Amal Clooney? Because they're both very educated, self-driven, ambitious, self-made women, you could argue, right? Like Lauren Sanchez also had a really decorated career. I think she was I don't know what her field necessarily is or what her primary profession is now, but I think at least she got started off as a news anchor. So she was kind of in public facing media, not necessarily on the entertainment side, but she was in like that news reporter realm. And she also, she made her own wealth before she met and married Jeff Bezos. But why do people hate Lauren Sanchez, but they don't hate Amal Clooney? It's because Lauren Sanchez is perceived as being unapologetic. Actually, I really like Lauren Sanchez. I don't know if you guys can tell. I mean, I rarely say out of my mouth that I dislike a woman unless she's actually committed a crime or something. I don't really like to say that, oh, I don't like this actress or that. If they're not my cup of tea, I just don't really talk about them that much because I'm naturally like not interested in their activities or what they're doing. But it takes a lot for me to say that I dislike a woman. And if it comes to that, it's not because like I dislike her. It's because of like what she did, right? That I view as, okay, she blatantly broke the law or she's a blatant racist, that type of thing. But I try to be very conscious of, not falling into the trap of, oh, I don't like her because I'm playing into, if I do that, like you'd be surprised more often than not. It's not you just exercising your free will and deciding that you like or don't like this person based on your own morals and ethic code. Don't be so naive to believe that, okay? More often than not, you're being steered by the media and other invisible forces, propaganda that is hurled at us each and every day to the point where we are desensitized to it. But don't take that to mean that we're not being influenced every single second of every day. So don't think that if you don't like a certain woman, like Sydney Sweeney, for example, although I know Sydney Sweeney has, the whole thing about her and her family being MAGA supporters. But aside from that, though, just if you look at the majority of discourse about someone like Sydney Sweeney, most girls just don't like her because they perceive her as, pandering to the male gaze. That's what she gets criticized for her a lot, right? Or they're like, oh, why does she always have her boobs out? And it's like, why do you have a problem with another woman showing off and enjoying her own body? That's not even the point. If you're upset that you think that she's a blatant racist, then be upset at that. Whatever people bring up as their first complaint about a woman, that tells me all I need to know about where their head is in terms of their relationship to misogynistic ideals. All right, so we went through, beautiful and hardworking. Okay, I'm gonna go out of order just because I have more examples here. Women who are perceived as beautiful and unapologetic. When I say unapologetic, I mean they unapologetically use their beauty for personal gain, whether it's to drive their career forward or to get favors from men. So I put S workers, the visible ones at least, fall under this category. Who else? Lauren Sanchez. Okay, so Lauren Sanchez, I feel like people put in this category because there could be many reasons, and I would love to hear if you have other theories. But me personally, I think it largely has to do with the way she presents herself aesthetically. People always like to come for her fashion sense, right? They like to say that she looks cheap, she looks like a hooker. Oh, I think also the plastic surgery is a little bit, obvious on her. Like she has kind of, I don't want to say botched, okay? Because again, I like Lauren Sanchez. I don't understand what this woman did aside from being ambitious and marrying a billionaire that is worth so much ire and vitriol. But I do understand, right? Because again, the fact that her plastic surgery looks a little bit obvious, that's a huge trigger for people, right? Because if you get plastic surgery and it's very tasteful, especially to the point where people don't even notice, then it's a non-issue, right? Because people don't notice. All they see is a very natural, beautiful face, which again, it can go one of both ways. If you use that beauty in a way that is socially acceptable, then they'll love you and they'll put you on the pedestal. But if you use it in a way that is not deemed proper or whatever, if you happen to be naturally beautiful, but you decide to get on OF or be an S worker, then there's always going to be, you're going to have more hate directed towards you as a woman. Yeah, because people don't like it when beautiful women exist without having to pay for it in some way. And so this is another epiphany that I had. This is where the concept of putting women through humiliation rituals comes from as well. And it's so sick to the point where the idea that women are they are expected to, and people are almost feral for women. The more beautiful they are, the more desirable they are perceived to be. People are like foaming at the mouth, essentially, to see those women suffer at the altar of either marriage, so they want to see her devoted to one man to prove that she's loyal and that she's not a hoe, she's not a slut, prove that she's not a gold digger, right? So she can't even marry like a rich man. She has to marry, if she marries a man that's like middle of the road, well-to-do, it's acceptable. But then they would prefer her to marry like a Dusty or a 50-50 guy that she's providing for, right? The more suffering, the more of the depletion of resources that they can obviously see, the more society likes that. And like the more society is going to look upon that beautiful woman favorably. It's really, really sick. And so that's why whatever situation we're talking about, whatever scale, whether it's you're talking about a local school in a small town and we're talking about, the homecoming queen or the prettiest girl in that town, or whether we're talking about a huge industry like Hollywood or just a regular, Fortune 500 company employee, a corporate baddie, so to speak. It doesn't matter which arena you find yourself in as a beautiful woman. There will be forces that try to pull you into the reenactment of this humiliation ritual script that is agreed upon for quote unquote beautiful and desired women in society. And it's so ingrained in us. Like our culture is so deeply misogynistic to the point where you will have people oftentimes when you get put into these situations where you're like, is this a humiliation ritual? Am I being hazed? Like, why are they doing this to me? Because usually like, okay, when it goes really left, sometimes it ends up in the woman even losing her life, right? So in those cases, it's automatically like, oh, she was such a victim. She lit up every room that she walked into, right? That's how they're going to read the description of her at the eulogy or funeral. But then in most cases, it's like, okay, they'll do a little bit of a humiliation ritual or a hazing period for you. And if you pass that without putting up a fight, if you bow down and kowtow to their game, in most cases, like if you just do that long enough to where you can appease this bloodlust that people in society have for seeing beautiful women suffer, they'll let you go after a certain point, right? And like, it's just the concept is so ingrained in us and in our society to the point where you have your peers or sometimes like your senpais, the people that are trying to position themselves as your mentors. They will take it upon themselves to humiliate you themselves because in their minds, they think they're doing you a favor because they're like, okay, well, if I don't do this to you now, then somebody else or some other group is going to haze you in the future anyway. And it's going to be like 8 or 10 times worse when they do it. So I might as well do it for you as a favor. And it's so sick because they think they're doing you a favor. But what they're really doing is like, they're just traumatizing you. And then you kind of develop this, in a lot of cases, right? Not me, okay? Because I don't even play those reindeer games. Like, I will just leave. I am a leaver and a quitter. I literally left, you guys know the story. Last year when I was working at my previous job, it was at a different luxury brand that I'm at, a different luxury brand from the one that I'm working at right now. But the moment that I caught on to all of the power harassment going on with my direct manager, I literally was like, nope. I went to a clinic and I told them, hey, tell them that, write me a note, tell them that they are causing me severe psychological distress and that I need to stay home essentially for the next 90 days, which was the exact amount of time that I needed for my contract to run out, which means that if once I had that note, I had the ability to claim not my full earnings, but I was able to claim a majority of the percentage of my salary without going into work because I had that doctor's note. So don't try it with me. I'm not the one or the two. But what happens in most cases, especially when the woman is still young, is that they'll develop this like trauma bond essentially, or not trauma bond. What's the word I'm looking for? Not Munchausen's syndrome. It's like when people grow to love and defend their captors or their abusers. Stockholm syndrome. Oh my God. Yeah. So you basically like a lot of so-called mentorship that goes on in companies and different clubs and groups. Sororities and fraternities are a good example of this too, where they feel like, okay, we need to put all the new rushes through a hazing process in order to trauma bond them with each other. They don't call it trauma bonding because they word it in a way where they justify it by saying that, well, if you go through a set of adverse circumstances with this group of people, then it's going to create like a deeper bond than if you were just casually interacting with each other. So like that's their justification for putting you through a hazing or a humiliation ritual. But at the end of the day, what happens is that like in most organizations, in Japanese culture, this is very strong as well. It's basically just just Stockholm syndrome that's happening in a lot of these mentor/mentee relationships. And especially if you're a beautiful, desirable woman, a lot of them will think that they're actually doing you a favor because they're like, well, it's better me than your peers or, another group that doesn't have as good intentions for you. Like, it's better that I traumatize you first. In a way, it's like you understand that this is their thought process. And if you're young enough, you might, you look up to your elders naturally as a younger person. You want to look up to them. You want to believe that they have more wisdom for you and that they're actually looking out for you. So it's like you believe them, but then at the same time, it's actually Stockholm syndrome because they literally traumatized you. But then you also gaslight, they don't even have to do the gaslighting. You will gaslight yourself for them. You will convince yourself that what they did was actually kind or actually in your best interest. You will convince yourself that, yeah, well, I prefer that it was my senpai or my mentor that put me through the humiliation ritual first. And this is where you have like people, again, gaslighting themselves and deluding themselves into believing that, oh, my manager, they basically power harassed me the whole time that I was a new hire. But, I really appreciate that they put me through the ringer because, it toughened me up really quickly so that I could progress in the role quicker, et cetera, et cetera. Like you have a lot of people that still they think this way and they buy into it.
So actually a lot of celebrity women or women who are in the public eye, they will actually go as far as to orchestrate or stage their own humiliation ritual just so that they can have control over their story. It's kind of like a performance. So for example, in the clip you're seeing right now, this was at the height of Jennifer Lawrence's popularity, and this is a clip of her tripping up the stairs when she was going to accept her Oscar at the 2013 Oscar Awards. Now, I'm not saying that I have proof that she did this on purpose or anything. Anderson Cooper, I remember, certainly seemed to think so at the time, and he kind of called her out on his talk show for faking the fall, to which she doubled down and responded that no, it was a real fall and that she was actually so humiliated, this, that, and the third.
And it was so devastating because it was this horrific humiliation to me that took away, I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to give a speech like that again. That didn't feel good for me not to have a speech. And I'll tell you what, I saw him at a Christmas party and I let him know. My friend told me that a vein was bulging out of my neck, but he apologized.
I don't know, you guys be the judge. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I tend to side with Anderson Cooper's interpretation of events. This is no hate, no shade towards Jennifer Lawrence, but it's just that I know how the game is played. So yeah, but even in that voice clip, you can see she was emphasizing how humiliated and how hurt she was, how much of an honor it was. She was just shocked to be called on stage and all of that. This is the performance that beautiful, successful, well-to-do women are expected to give in the public eye. You're supposed to be just tripping over yourself with humility and graciousness. It's almost like they're under threat. In a way, they are. It's like, you better put on this humble performance or else we could take away your accolades at any time. But this is just an example of one of many, whether staged or not, so-called humiliation rituals that I wouldn't be surprised are actually pitched to and created for stars, like famous women, by their PR teams in order for them to, control their public narrative. And if you look at Jennifer Lawrence's kind of public persona during that whole time, she was really enjoying a huge surge in popularity due to her relatable image, right? And I say image on purpose because we don't actually know who these stars are or how they are behind closed doors, but it's all about what image they can successfully portray to the public and convince the public of. Now, me personally, I never really fell for the okie doke, but that's another story. By the way, just to be clear, I do think that Anderson Cooper was being an asshat in that scenario, because it's like, she's damned if she does and she's damned if she doesn't. So what the hell is your problem, dude? Let's see you get up there in a strapless ball gown and accept an award. Oh wait, you can't because you were never nominated. So sit down, Anderson Cooper. Just to clear that up, I'm not taking up for Anderson Cooper here. And for those of you who follow Japanese pop culture, around the same year, actually, 2013, Minami Minegishi, who was an original member of the popular idol group AKB48, was caught by the paparazzi, or it was found out that she had spent the night with her boyfriend. So if you don't know, in idol culture here in Japan, they're not supposed to have boyfriends or
personal relationships because they have to feed into and uphold the fantasy for a lot of their basically pervy older male fan base that the fans want to be able to imagine themselves being in a romantic relationship with the idol. So that's why they actually have, this is a legitimate rule that a lot of talent agencies have, that their idols are not allowed to have boyfriends. And so in order to, again, lessen her punishment in the public eye, to at least mitigate it, she took it upon herself to shave her head as an act of like self-humiliation, which of course then had the positive effect, if you can call it that, of the fans, defending her and saying that, no, this is too far. I feel so bad for her. She doesn't have to do all that. Idols should be allowed to have relationships and enjoy their private lives just like anybody else. But this is how all the fans of these people ain't shit either. Idol culture ain't shit and the fans ain't shit. And I wouldn't care if all of it went to hell tomorrow. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry for that little outburst. I'm gonna try to keep it professional here. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, this idol culture, especially in Asia, like the parasitic, it's not even parasocial. I call it parasitic, sick, twisted, PDF pandering idol culture. It can go to hell for all those reasons and then some. But anyway, the point is that by shaving her own head publicly and taking it upon herself to orchestrate her own punishment and humiliation, that lessened, the backlash. Because imagine if she didn't do that, if she just went about her days after the scandal with her head held high, then the tide would have turned against her very quickly. And those very people that claim to love her and be her number one supporters, her number one fans, they would have had no hesitation in berating her and, basically bullying her into submission, administering their own version of whatever version of punishment that they felt was appropriate for her situation. But in order to avoid exactly that, she got ahead of the situation and shaved her head herself, which was obviously I'm not going to put the video or anything here, but as mentally distressing as that must have been for her, it was a better scenario than leaving it up to the public to decide what her humiliation should have been for that particular transgression in their eyes of having a boyfriend secretly on the side. So yeah, it's not just these huge, grand, newsworthy stories that we hear of. Most female celebrities or most beautiful women in the public eye are always performing some form of humility or self-deprecation on some scale, whether large or small, as a way to signal their non-threatening nature to society at large, whether it be women or men, literally all the time. In any culture, any entertainment scene across the world, whether they are pushed by their management to do so, or they themselves just intrinsically are following their intuition to do so for self-protection and preservation. Attractive female celebrities are always doing some version of virtue signaling, but as it pertains to I don't know how to explain it. It's like humility signaling or awkward signaling, as opposed to virtue signaling. They are constantly having to assert and prove to the public, just in regular interviews and whatnot, that they are just as clumsy or as insecure as other girls, even though they might be, never mind that they're a whole ass Victoria's Secret model. They're constantly expected to put on this performance of humility. And I know that it's because of this expectation foisted upon women by the patriarchy, by the beauty economics matrix, that the more perceived beauty, the more perceived privilege you have, the more people feel threatened by you for whatever reason, the more you have to almost, a lot of women, they live in fear of feeling like they have to put out that fire before it gets too big by constantly, self-deprecating or proving how down to earth they are, proving how much they're just like every other girl with insecurities and whatnot.
Well, you know what I like as a comfort food, and I heard you like it too. Is it true that you're a mac and cheese girl? As if I couldn't love you anymore.
Yes. Oh my
sorry.
gosh. Cheers.
Cheers. I love you so much.
It's you would think that any woman in the first or fourth quadrant would have it made because they were born winning the genetic lottery. But again, the walls of this matrix, the walls of the patriarchy, do not allow any woman to fully bask in the glory of just how beautiful and how much of a goddess she is. There's always something that the patriarchy or agents of the patriarchy, which often includes other women with internalized misogyny mindsets, right? There's always going to be some force sent to tear you down. And beautiful women are very, very aware of this, are constantly trying to, keep these forces at bay before they're destroyed by them.
I hope this is all making sense. I know it's a lot, but I'm gonna try to get through the other quadrants. So let's see. Yeah, so beautiful and unapologetic. I feel like this is the most dangerous place to be, unless. Okay, wait, let me go through all of them first and then we'll circle back to this. So yeah, the people that I listed here, like Kim Kardashian, Meghan Markle, Lauren Sanchez, because even though you would think that Lauren Sanchez and someone like Amal Clooney would be classified kind of in the same quadrant, I think the fact that Lauren Sanchez has obviously had a lot of work done, that signals to people that, oh, she's vain, right? She worries too much about her appearance. And also the fact that she dresses in a very sexy way. Like if you look at all of her outfits, even her wedding dress, she really likes to accentuate her hourglass figure, which is phenomenal, by the way. And this is why like I can really relate to Lauren Sanchez, because I also really like my hourglass figure. I'm not apologetic about it, and I'm not going to dress down or dress in boxy Uniqlo clothes just to make insecure bitches comfortable. Okay, let's go to quadrant 3. So if you're plain and unapologetic, or plain and lazy, or plain and a netball baby, right? I couldn't fit all of those descriptors here, but when I say unapologetic, just know that it encompasses all of those meanings. If you're like a netball baby, let's say, but you're not super beautiful, people they'll put up a performance that they're kind of displeased with you, or, they don't really like you. But at the end of the day, they won't truly feel threatened or triggered by you, because they will feel like, okay, but at least she's only like a 6 in terms of looks, right? She may have been born into a $1 billion family, but hey, at least she didn't get everything, right? And people said this about, this is a girl that you all blew up because for some reason you thought that she rich is right. And then the moment that she started doing things to reveal her true character, or the moment that she started acting in a way that you guys didn't approve of, that's when you turned on her. But Becca Bloom, I would put her in this category. And no, I'm not trying to insult anyone, okay, by calling them plain or average or whatever. But the reason that Becca Bloom is not as hated or as reviled by the internet now, even after, kind of her fall from grace, I don't know exactly what happened, but I just know that the tides kind of turned against her. I never liked her to begin with, because the whole thing felt suspicious to me then, and it feels suspicious to me to this day. Like, if you're actually so rich and privileged, why do you need to be on here and become a TikTok star and gain the adoration of all these millions and millions of people on top of it as well? That never made sense to me. And I also just, I don't have strong feelings about her, but she's just, again, someone that I was never interested in. And so I just never paid much mind to her. Okay, so Becca Bloom, I would say that, like, if she was really, really conventionally beautiful, right, and she was also soft life or privileged, my point is that people would hate her and come down on her harder. There would be even more of a concentrated smear campaign against her. But the fact that she's perceived as plain, and again, I'm not saying this to insult her personally, but, there was that viral clip of her going around without filter on her face, and people were like, I saw comments like, God is fair at least, right? Like, she didn't win the lottery in every department. Those types of comments, which is unnecessary, but hey, let's just call a spade a spade. So she's not like the Victoria's Secret, Megan Fox, like Hollywood starlet, beautiful type of vibe, right? She is obviously insanely rich. She comes from a privileged background, so she has the money and the resources at her disposal to make herself look to the best of her ability, but she doesn't quite fit that kind of top tier, threatening type of beauty that we think about when we're talking about this quadrant. So that's why I say that someone like Becca Bloom is still relatively safe, or like protected. She's safe from humiliation ritual, if you catch my drift. Like, people are disgruntled with her right now. They're kind of turning on her. But as far as I can see, I haven't heard anyone calling for her to be tarred and feathered, or what's the term that I'm looking for? Yeah, I haven't heard any calls for her to be burned at the stake, because at the end of the day, people don't feel that triggered by her. They might be triggered by the fact that, she's rich and she didn't have to work so hard for her money and her status, but they're not triggered by her looks, right? There's a lot of other people that their envy goes to when it comes to aesthetics, more so than Becca Bloom. In that sense, I would say she's a little more protected, right? Like, your plainness will protect you. And we know this, right? Even certain religions, like if you're a Muslim and you wear a hijab, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert or anything, because I'm not Muslim, but a part of the reason is so that you can protect your energy as a woman. The women who cover up their faces, whatever you believe, like whether or not you agree with that, the purpose of it, as detailed by actual women of that religion who choose to do that practice, is to basically not let outside people or people who are not worthy of looking at their beauty see it. Okay, so the purpose is protection, right? Protecting your own energy, protecting your beauty, and protecting yourself from the triggered or the jealous reaction that people might have at you when they see your beautiful face. So this is what I mean when I say that plainness is protection. And then in the last quadrant, or not last, we're going out of order, but hardworking and plain. So you'll have a respectable life. You will have likely stability, financially speaking. You know, usually these women are the ones that, again, similar to the beautiful ones that are also seen as hardworking or, you know, following a straight and narrow path. They do the same thing and they get the same results as a result of all the hard work and the studying that they put in. But it's just minus the adoration or the accolades for their looks, right? So essentially, you can live a good life, quiet, understated life. You can oftentimes achieve, you know, financial stability, afford some of the finer things in life through your hard work or through your profession that you didn't have to use your looks or your desirability to obtain. But the catch is that you're kind of invisible. So you're looked over unless it has to do with you being able to contribute something to the situation, whether it be from your expertise or your skills, etc., like whatever profession that you happen to be an expert in. Aside from that, you're kind of seen as invisible by society. And so fittingly, I promise I'm not, you know, doing this on purpose. Fittingly, I couldn't actually really think of any women, like celebrity women, that I would put in this quadrant. Can you? And I'm thinking like the top of the top, right? So let's see. Maybe like, I don't know, Whoopi Goldberg. I love Whoopi Goldberg, but she was never seen as, you know, the sex pot or sex symbol type. Regardless, she is still regarded as a very, very highly successful A-list actress, at least back in the day. I don't really know what she's up to now. I think she's still on The View. Which has been around for a long time. So yeah, Whoopi's been around for a minute. She's what I would categorize as like plain and like not desired for her body or her looks necessarily. However, highly, highly revered, highly celebrated because of just how huge her presence is in the entertainment industry. So that falls under hard work and suffering or sacrificing for your craft, right? I think she was also a comedian. Okay, so maybe female comedians also, I would say, is a typical archetype that falls in this quadrant. I'm going to put Amy Schumer, even though she also has things like politics related. I'm not talking about anyone's personal politics here. Okay, so let's just put that to the side. We are focusing on the economics of beauty in this video. So Amy Schumer is another one. She's kind of seen as like the quirky, funny. I think she's also known, or at least when she first came out, she was known for more like vulgar sexual jokes. That's kind of what got her a pass in terms of like, even though she didn't fit the 10 out of 10 ideal for a Hollywood beauty, she was still kind of welcomed into the entertainment industry. And like people don't come down as hard on her, as far as I know, because, well, first of all, she beat everyone to the punch by being a comedian, right? So she already like talked about all the sexual jokes and the uncomfortable, you know, elephant in the room about women's looks and desirability and whatnot. I don't remember exactly what her sets were about, but I remember she must have touched upon some form of desirability politics before. And so because she does that as like an explicit part of her living as a comedian. Again, I'm not really sure what she's up to now or if she even still considers herself a comedian or what, but because of that, Hollywood kind of like accepted her and society tolerates her, right? Even though she's not super beautiful, people are not villainizing her for being not a Victoria's Secret model because they're like, okay, well, she worked hard to get here though. She's a comedian. So she got her success through her wits and her intelligence rather than her beauty and her body.
And again, because she's not considered like a supermodel 10 out of 10 beauty, other women also do not find her as threatening. So a lot of women in the plain, hardworking camp, they can tend to have a lot of success and adoration from female fans in particular because women are really typically happy to support and rally around a girl that they feel like they can relate to, essentially, like someone who is not the Hollywood standard of beauty but still managed to make it. Women love to rally around and support that type for lack of a better term, you could say that it's a cope in some aspects. But yeah, there's this concept of girl pretty and boy pretty, right? So I think we all know certain actresses, their careers are oriented towards serving or pandering more towards a female fan base as opposed to boy pretty actresses or the bombshells that kind of pander more towards the male fantasy. I'm not saying that this is a choice on the part of the actress necessarily, but I think especially nowadays when you look at especially Hollywood, for example, it's clear the select few women that they try to push as like the next hot thing as a way to kind of assuage female fans' insecurities. And I don't know, in a way, I feel like the Megan Foxes and the Angelina Jolies of the industry, we are seeing those types less and less. And I don't know if it's because of more women these days being in positions of power in Hollywood to push the next big female celebrity, and that's why they maybe subconsciously or consciously purposely choose a girl who is not boy pretty to push as the next it girl. But anyway, that's a whole additional discussion.
Okay, so the question though, let me see if I missed anything from my notes so far. Oh, I have another one. Okay, Amber Heard. You guys remember? If you are a Johnny Depp fan, maybe my channel is not for you. I'm just gonna say that preemptively, but let's see, where would I put Amber Heard? So Amber Heard is beautiful, but she's seen as unapologetic, right? Because even though there was wild amounts of evidence to suggest like a lot of abuse and effed up things that Johnny Depp did to her, I mean, there were literal recordings of him like threatening to R-word her and stuff, were there not? But regardless of that, the public just did not care. Okay, they were not having it because the perception of Amber Heard is that she was a gold-digging, up-and-coming starlet. At the time that she got with Johnny Heard, oh my God. Freudian slip. At the time that she got with Johnny Depp, I think she was still very much up and coming as an actress, right? So people perceive her as being a parasite, essentially, like latching onto him because he's already an established star and using him to further her career and all of that. And because she's beautiful, she's not given a pass for that, right? Because she's beautiful, now all of a sudden she's a witch, she's a succubus. It doesn't matter that we have audio tape evidence of him DVing her. It doesn't matter because she wasn't the perfect victim. She wasn't, hardworking and long-suffering, and she was never a good girl, right? She doesn't have a good girl image. And so people's vitriol and hatred of her because she occupies this quadrant, it has no end and it has no bounds. But do you see how it literally doesn't matter where on the spectrum you fall under? You cannot escape this matrix. And last time I checked, I'm not saying that men don't have their own set of problems to go through in society, because let's be very clear, men and women, everyone suffers under patriarchy, but I don't see any equivalent to, like, let's say a handsome man who works hard, right? I don't see that they have to necessarily die young, like half the women that I have. As an example, in this quadrant, how many men that are really conventionally handsome, really attractive, and seen as kind of like the gold standard, the Prince Charming type, who are also hardworking and self-sacrificing, like they have the classic story of long sleepless nights and grinding to get to their goal. How many of them had to die in order for the world to worship them and appreciate them? Or do they get to be worshipped and put on a pedestal in real life while they're living? It seems to me that, like, for some reason, it's okay for a man to be handsome and super successful by his own merits, right? Like by his intellect and whatnot. It's okay for a man to occupy both and be in this quadrant and still be alive, living his best life, thriving, and people will give him the accolades while he's still alive. But in a lot of cases for the women, they have to die in order for us to see the full extent, be made aware of the full extent of their suffering. And then as a society, we feel like, oh my God, she was such an angel on earth. Oh my God, she was gone too soon. But at least she'll be immortalized forever. At least she the one silver lining of her dying young is that she'll be beautiful forever. Like Marilyn Monroe was 36 years old when she died. So at least she's always going to be young and beautiful in our memory of her. But that's after her death. Okay. So what's the point of, I don't know about you, I don't want to be loved only after I die. But again, that's the matrix of pretty economics. There is somewhat of a loophole though. There is a bit of a workaround, and I'm going to name some names of women that I came up with. that I feel were able to somewhat circumvent this matrix. They cannot fully escape it because, again, okay, so the moment that the public starts to perceive them or their actions in a certain way, that's when the mechanisms start taking place. Wherever you end up in, and there's many women who they may end up in more than one quadrant throughout different periods of their life, right? Maybe you were beautiful and the gold standard of beauty when you were young, but then, you know, you became a mother or you had a bunch of kids and now your body did not snap back to the size 0 that it was when you were in your 20s. People still consider you beautiful, but you're not like on that threatening level anymore to where women hate you because they feel insecure about themselves. And so like you move quadrants, right? You might move from beautiful and hardworking to plain and hardworking. So then here, all that happens is that you become a little invisible. So this happens to, okay, I'm going to put here for plain and hardworking. This happens a lot simply when you age as a woman. So aging women. But yeah, how do you escape this? How do you beat the system? Again, I don't think it's possible to ever break out of these 4 solid walls as long as we are under patriarchy, but there is somewhat of a backdoor workaround. And I'm going to read some names. So Miranda Kerr. Crap, do I have any other examples? Who else? Okay, I feel like, oh my God, what's her name? Savannah? LeBron James's wife. Savannah James. Lori Harvey. I'm going to say Lori Harvey, and let me pick someone else. Kim Kardashian is another one that falls into the beautiful but unapologetic quadrant because she's perceived as, I mean, to be fair, she did jumpstart her and her family's visibility due to an sex tape. But yeah, it doesn't matter how hard she works on her empire or even the fact that she's studying to become a lawyer now, or I don't know if she abandoned that dream already, but like it doesn't matter how hard Kim Kardashian works, which I do believe the reality is that she works very hard. And you even see it throughout the reality show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And yet somehow Kim can never shake that image that she first stepped out on the scene with, which was her tape. So there's that, and also the fact that I would say that she's kind of similar to Lauren Sanchez in the way that she's just very unapologetic with using her body and her desirability, using her sexuality to also garner attention so that she can, sell her TV show, sell her products, etc. People really don't like that when women do that. And especially if it's unapologetically, right? If you can do it in a way where it seems like you're not doing it on purpose or you're not being brazen about it, then you might get forgiven. There's a handful of women that are able to occupy that space. And I think that characterization that usually comes from looks. Like if you just happen to have a more innocent look, most people will give you a pass. I hate to say this. This makes me cringe so hard because I am Asian, but I feel like a lot of Asian women benefit from a favorable perception because people see Asian women as just being more innocent and childlike. And a lot of it has to do with just our natural features. We have like softer features than, let's say, a typical Western face. So that's why you see, if you just think of like any female K-pop star who, they're definitely judged very harshly in Asian society. So that's a whole other story. But typically though, if you think of any huge like Asian female celebrity that's hot right now, so like Lisa or Jenny or any of those girls, first of all, we don't really know anything about their real personalities, right? Because their image is so strongly controlled by their agencies and the whole machine behind them. And then secondly, I think that, yeah, as much as I hate to say it and it makes me cringe, their look, like their cutesy, innocent look as compared to Western musicians and like the Western equivalent of their profession, they're always going to be looked at in a more, childlike, innocent way just because of the way that they look. Even though like in Asia, it really doesn't mean anything because we all look Asian here. But on the world stage though, like I think Asian female celebrities are more so infantilized and people just think that, oh my gosh, she's so cute and pure and innocent looking. So even though she might be a raging bitch behind the scenes, or even though she might have a completely different edgy personality, it doesn't matter because people perceive them as being cute and innocent and docile. So they usually get perceived to fall under this category, even if they might be here or, I say this from personal experience as well. Like I don't consider myself to have a cutesy personality. I think I have a very whimsical personality, right? I keep the whimsy alive in my life. I keep my childlike wonder and all of that. but I can tell when like certain people look at me and they project certain cutesy qualities onto me that are just not there. Like they actually don't exist, but they project it onto me simply because of the way that I look physically. I don't have any desire. If you ask me, okay, like, does that bother you? Do you want to prove them wrong? Actually, no, because why? For what? You know, like I'm not going to waste energy. I don't need to prove myself to people that have no critical thinking skills in the first place. But yeah, just wanted to add that in there. Okay, so I named some people. I think Miranda Kerr, Savannah James, Lori Harvey. These are all beautiful women, right? And I'm trying to think. There are a few YouTubers as well that you could say. I'm trying to think of like who is a really, really classically, conventionally attractive YouTuber, like beauty YouTuber. I can't think of any because, you know, I don't watch those types of channels. Like no tea, no shade to them. Any conventionally attractive female YouTuber, usually on the younger side, like 20s or 30s, who focuses on either beauty or fashion or travel, and they never get into any sort of like political topics or polarizing topics. They only focus on, for lack of a better word, fluffy content, right? Like makeup and fashion and stuff. And they never really step outside of that box. They never really touch anything controversial. Any female creator who is conventionally attractive, who falls in that category, I would also put down on this list. Okay, so I have here the cheat code, so to speak, to being a beautiful woman and protecting yourself. Being a beautiful woman who is like unapologetic about wanting to live the soft life, or you don't want to, you know, suffer or show the world that like you're hardworking, and you don't want to be super self-sacrificial, but you want to avoid the ire that comes with that type of image, right? You don't need the smoke, okay? Like you don't want to be the target of humiliation rituals and such, which I would think, you know, all of us, that's our desire. But see, my point is that, okay, there's women that are okay with taking the risk, such as like, there's a lot of S workers these days, I feel like, that are becoming more open with their profession. They're very bravely, in my opinion, sharing their experiences on social media for the betterment of a lot of just women's experiences in general with men. So I really commend those women, and I have a lot of respect for S workers. You know, you'll never catch me saying anything bad about S workers, especially the ones that come on here and they put themselves on a public platform in order to spread messages to help the female collective at large. I know that that's a choice, right? For them to put themselves at risk of even more scrutiny and vitriol and hatred. And I'm very thankful to them because they don't have to do that, right? But they're doing it because they want to help women who are not in S work, who might be having issues with men, or like they want to, you know, help prevent normal women, everyday women, from being abused and taken advantage of, even if that comes at the cost of their own safety or their own image to a certain extent online. They're willing to do it. So, you know, I commend those women. But at the same time, I think that for a lot of us, if we had the choice, we do not want to put ourselves in the line of fire like that necessarily. But at the same time, we do want to be able to embrace our beauty and our femininity. We do want to live a soft life. So I'm talking about myself as well. We want to live a soft life. We want to be unapologetic. We want to just thrive and live our best life. Yeah, like glow up as much as possible and just become the best version of ourselves, right? But we know that at some point, if you become too visible, if you glow up too much, you get a little too rich or too close to the ideal image of beauty, the ideal beauty standard, whatever you want to call it, then the higher your visibility gets, the more you become a target for misogynistic men and women, for people who are triggered by the way that you look for whatever reason. And so how do you protect yourself, right? Basically, you have to move in silence. You have to make yourself invisible to a certain extent, okay? Which is, it kind of sucks, right? Because it's like, why do I have to do that? Well, if you want to protect yourself, if you want to live the unapologetic life as a beautiful, desirable woman in this society. So let's say, okay, a lot of women, they're okay with giving up the beauty component. So this is why you see a lot of women who, like, they might actually be born a natural baddie. They might look perfectly symmetrical face, beautiful even without makeup, and yet they enter into, let's say, the corporate world where they can feel immediately that their female coworkers are looking at them in some kind of way or feeling triggered by them. So a lot of women do compromise by dressing down or dressing more conservative. They purposely don't wear a lot of makeup. They purposely water down their looks in order to not draw as much attention in the workplace, right? There's a lot of women that do that. Me personally, I'm not willing to do that because I feel like it's my right to pursue beauty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of beauty is my motto. The more beautiful, the more visible you are, and the more that people perceive you as being unapologetic about your beauty, even being forward with using your beauty to get yourself further in life or social climb or whatever it may be, the more that people clock it or catch on to what you're doing, because trust me, they're going to be watching you. Like the monitoring spirits that they are, the more visible you become and the brighter that you shine, then you're going to find yourself like bumping up against this barrier here. And once you bump up against the barrier, there's nothing good that can come of that, because you're just going to invite more and more attacks, whether it be energetically or physically. And so in order to mitigate that, basically, one of the most effective tactics is to be silent with your moves. And I'm going to say selectively invisible, okay? Because of course it's like impossible to be completely invisible. And we don't want to be completely invisible either, right? Like I personally, I enjoy being on social media to a certain extent. I enjoy certain platforms more than others. Let's make that clear. But like, I don't want to completely cut myself off from the world. You know, that's also like, what's the point of that? That's not fun to me. But the women who are actually able to fully occupy this space of being super beautiful, you know, 10 out of 10, but then also just enjoying their soft life, whether it's through their own work or through marrying into a wealthy family, the only way for those women to truly protect themselves is to limit their visibility in society.
And I don't know why I forgot to mention this one. I think because I usually just take it as such a given, but accumulating FU money, okay? So stacking your money and becoming financially free and independent is definitely also, I would say, the number one way, as kind of like the most foolproof way possible that you can protect yourself under both the patriarchy and capitalism. Essentially, is my belief. Because if you try to, you know, play by the rules of the matrix and bend yourself into a pretzel, move yourself across quadrants to get a certain type of treatment from your in-group or society at large, like, it's not going to work, because you're still stuck in the box at the end of the day, right? As I've been pretty much detailing throughout this entire video, even if you manage to engineer your own migration from one quadrant to another that you perceive to be more favorable, or you would rather be in quadrant 2 than in quadrant 1, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's still a trap to keep you going around in circles and waste your life energy, essentially, trying to appease the forces of patriarchy, which encompass all the quadrants, right? Like every single woman, no matter where they fall on this matrix, they are fencing us in. As long as you play by the rules of the matrix, or as long as you're a woman, really, who has visibility to some extent, you are still kind of like acquiescing to being held hostage in this weird ass patriarchal zero-sum matrix. Think of the borders of the matrix as like electrical fences or something. Think of it like a literal gulag. And I'm sorry to use that imagery, but I feel like it is that serious. So yeah.
Be quiet. Be silent about social climbing moves. Some of the good examples that I can think of in terms of celebrity women or public women is Miranda Kerr, you know, who was rumored to be a huge sugar baby back in the day, which again, like when I say all these terms, I'm not insulting any women, okay? I'm just saying, I'm stating the facts of the situation. If you hear me say that someone was a sugar baby or someone was an escort and you take that as me insulting that woman, then that says more about your mindset and how you are still operating under the brainwashing of internalized misogynistic programming, more so than me. Because I'm not, when I say that women are engaging in S work or whatever, I don't see that as inherently less or more honorable than a woman that's working in corporate, okay? If anything, like, I commend them for being, you know, true to themselves and going after what they want without kowtowing or bowing down to society's expectations for them to be a good girl and do things the right way, right? Like, no, fuck that. Get your bad girl, as long as they're not hurting other women in the process. Notice I didn't say as long as they're not hurting other people, because men do deserve to get hurt sometimes. So I actually don't care if, usually when a woman hurts a man, he deserved it. Like, he was inviting it anyway. So anyway, that's another topic. But yeah, as long as they're not hurting other women to get to where they are, I don't care what they do to make a living, okay? Because I feel like unless you're willing to step in and pay that woman's rent or pay for her livelihood, what right do you have as an outsider to judge the way that she makes a living for herself, you know? And let me be clear as well. When it comes to, for example, like a married man using an S worker or going to S work services in order to fulfill or satiate a desire that he feels that he's not getting at home, I don't place the onus on the S worker, because the S worker is there to just do her job and fulfill the demands of the market that she's in. I place the entire onus on the person who is married to stay faithful to their spouse. This is man or woman, but in this case, we're talking about men that cheat on their spouses with S workers, right? So I don't consider somebody who is outside of a marriage to be responsible for keeping that marriage intact. That's ridiculous. So anyway, I think Miranda Kerr is a good example of someone who's able to occupy the beautiful, you know, the top tier beauty and soft life quadrant with minimal attacks on her character, because even though there are people that to this day, they try to dig up dirt about her past and talk negatively down on her about how she used to be a yacht girl or whatever, she is basically just minding her own business with her new billionaire husband. I think Miranda Kerr is a really, really interesting case study, actually. I wanted to do a deep dive on Miranda Kerr at some point. Maybe that will have to wait for another day. But yeah, as far as I know, I think Miranda Kerr is playing her cards right, because I've never heard her say anything controversial or get caught up into any controversial politics. Like, she hasn't said anything incendiary. So she doesn't give the haters or the insecure people of the world or the agents of the patriarchy any additional ammo to bring her down, if you know what I mean. Like, they're always going to get triggered by her. They're always going to gossip just because of how insanely beautiful she is and how much she represents and embodies the ideal beauty standard of today. However, I feel like she's hedging her position really well. To me, she's unapologetic, because I don't get the sense that she ever like was a pick me, for lack of a better word. I never saw her overly try to prove herself in the industry. She always was just kind of like, yeah, I'm a Victoria's Secret model, and I think she has her own skincare line or whatever, but she was always very unapologetic in terms of her dealings with men as well. Like, we know she has a type and it starts with a B. So Miranda Kerr has a history of being connected to billionaires, right? Nobody except for her and those men will ever know what actually went down in private in their relationships, but she's been connected to quite a number of billionaires throughout her long career as a model, ultimately settling down with the Snapchat billionaire. Evan Spiegel is his name. This is the crazy thing about Miranda Kerr, because she managed to settle down with a billionaire who is actually 7 years younger than her, and he happens to be like one of the better looking ones. Personally, you know, I don't find Evan Spiegel to be all that handsome, but I can recognize that, yeah, by, again, conventional beauty standards, he is considered to be kind of like a handsome man, especially in the billionaire circles, and he's young on top of it. So
not only did Miranda Kerr play her cards well in terms of minimizing her punishment in the beauty economics game, she also defied like another popular patriarchal talking point or fear-mongering point that they like to use to belittle women, which is that we get less valuable as we get older, right? Or we hit the wall past a certain age.
She was able to snag him. Now she's living in marital bliss, and you don't really hear much from her unless it's just to promote a new product or a new line from her. So she's playing her cards right, because she doesn't give the public anything to attack her with. Another person that I put down is Savannah James, who is LeBron James's wife. I feel like she's also, you know, she's beautiful. She's the wife of a basketball player, so she also has kind of like that soft life. I'm sure she has her own businesses and whatnot going on, but I've never heard of Savannah James doing anything messy or getting in any drama, right? And as far as I know, she's not on any reality TV shows either. Is she? No, I don't think so. I've never really seen her in the public spotlight that way. So she kind of just plays her position as a soft life, kept wife, not kept in the sense that like she just is a housewife. I'm sure she has her own businesses, but I think she's done really well with protecting her image, right? And protecting herself, and by extension, her family, from criticism, as opposed to someone like Ayesha Curry, for instance, who had a little less control, we'll say, with her mouth. And, you know, I'm not going to get into the details, but Ayesha Curry has had a handful of controversial interviews, which shouldn't have been controversial. That's the thing. Like, she never said anything super crazy in any of her interviews, but because she is so beautiful, right? And she is seen as an object of desire, anything that she says can and will be used against her, especially because, you know, she's married to Steph Curry, who is, I don't even know what sport these people play. I'm so sorry. I'm not into sports at all. But Steph Curry, even I know the name. I think he's a basketball player. I'm not sure. But she married him. They got married very young. And so she basically became known as the wife of Steph Curry for the rest of, their adulthood. There was one interview where she said that, because Steph Curry is like a huge sports star. So he has a lot of groupies that are sometimes like disrespectful of the fact that he has a wife. So she was complaining about the fact that Steph has all these girls throwing themselves at him, but she never has any men sliding into her DMs or hitting on her or flirting with her. And she said it's not that she wants the invitation to do anything that could be perceived as infidelity towards her husband, of course, but she said something to the effect of, it would be nice to know once in a while that I'm still desired, right? Like, how is it fair that Steph has all these girls that throw themselves at him, but then when it comes to me, it's crickets, even though obviously she's a very beautiful woman. If she wasn't married, there would be a lot of men that would be trying to shoot their shot. But because she's married to Steph Curry, men don't move in the same way that women move in, right? So men are more likely to really respect the fact that, okay, she's married to one of the greatest sports talents in our generation, and out of our respect for Steph or whatever, like, we're not going to go after another man's wife, especially a successful one that is really respected in the community and whatnot. And so, like, it wasn't anything crazy. Again, if she was more plain looking, we're talking about Ayesha Curry now, right? If she was plain and then she was perceived as being the soft life, wife of a basketball player and all of that, people would not have had as much to say to her for those comments. I don't think it would have been so much at the forefront of people's minds. They might have noticed a little bit and been like, oh, okay, Ayesha Curry said this. But if she looked more plain, if she wasn't like such a stunning beauty, I think people would barely notice, or just, I don't think they would be as interested in her comments about wanting to be hit on or be flirted with once in a while, even though she's a married woman. So protect yourselves. Move in silence, girls. I'm just checking my notes here to see if I didn't miss anything. Lori Harvey as well. People love to hate on Lori Harvey because she's beautiful. Okay, well, I think she did have that brief stint where she was dating Diddy. That was not a good look, I do have to admit. But one thing about Lori Harvey is that she, again, knows how to protect herself from energetic attacks and from attempts to put her through any type of public humiliation ritual, because she doesn't give people any ammo to work with, right? Like, she's unapologetic when it comes to dating all different types of men. Like, when it comes to her personal life, she's not apologetic about demanding her worth, knowing her worth, dating frequently and often as a young, beautiful, desirable woman in her prime. And she doesn't care if that upsets people, but she's also like not stupid enough to let her guard down and start yapping her mouth on some random podcast for no returns, right? And actually, in return, she would probably get even more criticism from agents of the patriarchy. So, move in silence, selective visibility. Okay, so you have to be selective. Like, unfortunately, if you want to protect yourself as a beautiful woman who lives life unapologetically, people really, really don't like when women have audacity past a certain level. Okay, that's why so many women, and I see this a lot, especially in Japanese society as well, or like a lot of just Asian societies in general, where it's almost more important. The image that you project out onto the world is more important than any reality that you have at home. And so this is why a lot of women opt to perform suffering. Okay, they have to feign ignorance whenever people comment on how beautiful and attractive and successful they are. They have to feign humility. And then some of them are so brainwashed, or the pressure is so great to perform this humility and humble, hardworking persona, to the point where so many women have actually deluded themselves into thinking that this is how they really feel. I do really want to work hard. I do want to prove that I'm more than a pretty face. You have heard this. You have heard plenty of famous actress or singer or whoever say this in a public interview, have you not?
I'd rather be getting a paycheck for being famous than working at my parents' restaurant.
But I would argue that there's virtue in the hard work. I would rather work at the restaurant.
But that would be your path.
Why, though? Why are we required to perform humility in that way, whereas a man in the same position would never be expected or required to do that in order to protect himself? So I think this quadrant, the most disturbing I guess, like hypothesis or truth that I have been able to parse out of this entire exercise is that if you want to be revered and admired as being like a traditionally or conventionally attractive beauty, if you really want to be admired and adored for your beauty, which most women naturally want to be admired for their beauty, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I don't see anything wrong with embracing that either. It's a natural part of the feminine experience and the feminine desire to be regarded upon favorably and to be admired. But I think the darkest realization that I came to with this exercise is that the most extreme cases of deification of certain beautiful women in history, they have all ended with a woman perishing or expiring from this planet either much earlier, like much more prematurely than they should have. Their life was tragically cut short. Either they die from, a long-suffering battle with depression, cancer, or I don't know, through childbirth, anything that's seen as kind of like a noble reason for dying. That catalyzes like the public deification of such a woman quickly. But then sometimes also, in a lot of cases, just a freak accident, right? Like in the case of Princess Diana, which was not an accident, but you know what I mean? Like Princess Diana was unexpectedly taken from us really early through a car crash. And then similarly with Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, she was also taken from us in a plane crash. And Aaliyah is a huge one. I can't believe I forgot Aaliyah. Aaliyah was taken from us in, a violent, horrible plane crash, freak accident as well. And so why is it that women need to literally die in order to be deified and worshipped as the goddesses that they are? Anything short of that, it's like society, the patriarchy, will find a way to tear them down. It will find a reason as to why she should not be admired or revered. They will run smear campaigns and like entire background checks. Just look at the likes of Lauren Sanchez, Meghan Markle, Amber Heard, Kim Kardashian, all these women in our modern day zeitgeist whose largest crime, as far as I can tell, is being unapologetic and loving themselves and refusing to perform humility, refusing to perform like unawareness of how beautiful and how desirable they actually are. And in the cases where it is known or it's obvious to the public that they know the power that their beauty holds and they're using it, they're Spartan about using it to their full advantage to further their career or to improve their lot in life by social climbing or by marrying into a rich family, the more that it's perceived that these women know what they're doing and that they consciously made that choice for themselves, the more they're going to be hated and reviled in a patriarchal society. That's my thesis on the game theory of pretty economics. Yeah, I just wanted to really expose how effed up it is to be a woman in this world and how the system is literally set up. I'm not going to say it's set up to make us fail, okay? I'm not going to be that nihilistic because we be winning out here. We're thriving regardless. We will always thrive. If you decide that you're a bad bitch, you are, period. And it doesn't matter, like, fuck whatever anyone else has to say. But the system is set up to where we cannot escape the matrix, essentially, unless you break the rules. Okay? Move in silence. Be selective about what you share with people.
Stack your money.
Be mindful about monitoring spirits and triggered, insecure spirits, misogynistic men and women. Be careful of what you share around them. Be careful about how much of yourself you reveal and you give to people. Another great way to protect yourself, another thing that I talk about all the time on this channel, is to make sure that your time and your energy is never given freely to anyone. Make sure that you are always compensated every time you do anything. When you breathe, make sure that you are compensated or getting paid for it in some way. When you come online, make sure that you're earning AdSense revenue. Okay. Don't get on social media just for the sake of getting on social media. So I'm not saying do OnlyFans or something, but I'm saying like at least the OnlyFans girls, the S workers that are selling their pictures online to male subscribers and things of that nature, at least those girls are getting paid, right? So I would rather that you get paid for a sexy picture than to post a sexy picture on your public Instagram and have like a bunch of dusties be able to see that for free without even compensating you for it. And then on top of that, you're going to invite even more jealousy and more ire from the, those insecure women who are still operating under and they're still clinging to internalized misogyny to validate them. They're playing life by the rules that they think they need to play by in order to get rewarded by the patriarchy. But as we saw, again, as I've repeated over and over again, there is no winning, okay? because you're going to be trapped in the matrix no matter what. They're going to get you no matter what quadrant or where along the spectrum you find yourself.
This is why it's really fruitless at the end of the day, and at worst dangerous, okay? If you just blindly accept and buy into this whole beauty, economics, respectability game as it's laid out for us by the patriarchy, like a trap. It's not designed for us as women to ever win fully, okay? It's not designed for a woman to ever come out completely on top. It's always going to be men that come out on top in this zero-sum game. You know, at best, you could live a quiet, calm, peaceful life, I guess, and have respect to some degree as long as you play by their little rules and you make sure not to break the egos of the men or the male-identified women in power. But then you never get to fully express your full glory and power as a sovereign woman. At worst, you could literally lose your life. Case in point, a lot of the individuals you see in Quadrant 1. So, yeah, basically the whole respectability game is a trap. It's a scam. If you have a certain quadrant that you would like to occupy, you feel that that's the most comfortable space for you to be, whether it be 2 or 4. If you manage to so-called win the game at your own life level, that's fine. I'm not going to villainize. I don't believe in villainizing women for wanting to just make the best of whatever system or scenario they find themselves in, but just be aware, be conscious that that's what you're doing. You're playing into a zero-sum game at the end of the day. But me personally, I prefer to just circumvent the matrix altogether, or as much as possible, right? Because the good thing about living as a woman in the 21st century, in most first world countries at least, is that we do have more agency these days as women than we did even just 50 years ago. We can make our own money. We do have several avenues available to us to gain financial freedom, gain financial independence, and all of that. So if I had to pick a quadrant, honestly, I personally prefer number 4, but even more ideal than that for me would be to just gain financial independence, accumulate FU money, and, pop out on the scene when I feel like it, stunt on people when I feel like it, but then retreat and always have the option to kind of disappear and protect my peace, protect my visibility when I feel it's necessary.
The only way out is to circumvent and to make up your own rules and make up your own strategy. Okay, so that's another thing that's huge on my channel. Strategy is everything, especially if you're beautiful, if you're ambitious, if you refuse to perform humility, if you refuse to perform suffering or undergo suffering in order to gain acceptance and validation from people that are probably miserable and you don't even, why would you even want their approval? Then just know that there's a way, but you're going to have to go around, okay? You're going to have to build your own strategy. It's not going to be easy because the system and the game is designed to keep you confined within these 4 walls, okay? So you need to actively come up with a strategy and with ways to protect yourself and circumvent the blocks that are put in your way. And so we are going to continue doing that on this channel. Don't you worry. I have a few things up my sleeves. I truly love women. I actively work to undo my internalized misogyny every single day because first of all, I am able to admit, as hard and as much as I don't want to, I am able to admit that I, as well as any other woman who has been raised up in this world, under this patriarchal system, I do have internalized misogyny to some extent, even though I do feel like I had a good foundation because, you know what, I have to give credit to mostly my mom for that, but that's going to be a separate video. If you want me to do it, I'll do a separate video on what I feel like are my credentials, so to speak, to kind of be a leader in this movement towards radical female empowerment. Unprogramming or deprogramming the feminine collective from our internalized misogyny. Undoing and helping other women deprogram their internalized misogyny. I realized it's a topic and it's a cause that I want to become kind of like a core tenet of my message here on this channel.